Hi, my name is Mike Reid. I'm Dean of the College of Health and Human Performance. We are honored today to have with us the founding chair of the Eric Friedheim Tourism Institute Advisory Board, one of the most successful and longest standing volunteer boards in our college. It's affiliated with our Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Management Department. Hal Herman is someone who I've gotten to know personally. I'm honored to be able to speak with him today and to ask him a few questions about the amazing contributions he's made to the University of Florida, to the tourism industry, especially in the publishing range, and to our college and to the advisory board that he founded. So, Hal, welcome to this conversation. It's an honor to have you with us. I thought we might start at the beginning. I know that you've been in journalism and writing for a long time. I especially like the story that you tell about how you got started in journalism and writing when you were in the Navy. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Thank you, Mike. When I was 17, the World War II was still in progress, which sort of chronologically dates me. And I enlisted in the Navy on what is called a minority cruise, where they accepted you before you were 18 and had to register for the draft if your parents signed for your admission. And aboard the ship, I served on a light cruiser, CL-98, the USS Tucson. It's an anti-aircraft cruiser, and had an unusual job of being, I guess you'd call the yeoman to the engineering department, believe it or not. One day I got a call from the executive officer and said, Herman, the captain wants to see you. And of course, being a 17-year-old seaman, the first thing that came to my mind is I'm in trouble. And one of the things that I did daily on the ship was the fuel and water reports. How many miles we sailed, how many gallons of fuel we used, how many gallons of water we evaporated. We had our own evaporating system. And the first thing that came to my mind is that the reason I'm in trouble is that I made a mistake in the fuel and water reports and we're out of fuel in the Pacific. So I came up to the captain's cabin and the Marines, two Marines guarding it, and opened the curtains, and there was my service record on a table there, and the captain, I'll never forget his name, Saunders, looked up at me and said, Herman, I see by your records that you're interested in some sort of journalism. I said, yes, sir. He said, I think it'd be good for the ship's morale if we had a ship's newspaper. He says, would you do it? On your own time, of course. So I said, yes, sir. I would have said yes to anything at that point. And so I started a newspaper called the Tucsonian. We did it on a mimeograph machine. I type up a stencil and ink this drum, and we run off copies for everybody. Well, during that thing, I found something out about journalism and the impact it has in people's lives, besides informing them and entertaining them, how much meaningful it was for them to communicate, believe it or not, through the written word. And so at that point, I decided when I left the Navy and got discharged, I would go to school and earn a journalism degree. Which I did. Fortunately, in 1946, I enrolled at the University of Florida in their journalism program, believe it or not, as a sophomore, because I went to school under GI Bill, and they gave you some tests so that you wouldn't have to take the comprehensive courses. And if you passed the test as a veteran, you would automatically move into eliminate your freshman year. By the way, Mike, as I reflect on that, I regret it. I wish I had spent more time, because some of the greatest years and some of the most memorable years that I had was being at the University of Florida, and all the fun and work and people I met and things I did that enhanced me and my role and my future in the publishing world. So I wish I had spent my entire 4 years instead of graduating in 2.5 years, which.
Don't I remember while you were here that you worked with the alligator?
I not only worked on the alligator, but I became the managing editor. I had a radio program. I also was on the yearbook. By the way, it was called the Seminole in those days, because FSU was still Florida State College for Women, and worked on the Orange and Blue magazine, which was called the Orange Peel at one time, and a number of organizations. I was in a social fraternity, and did a lot of activities on campus, which, as I previously stated, helped me in future life in all the things that I did, and all the basics that I learned working on campus helped me as I went forth into the workplace. At the end of my college career, I was probably one of the few honors that I cherish, and I've received more awards than I care to tell you. But one of them was the selection to the University Hall of Fame. And somewhere in the Rice Union building, if covered with dust, probably is my picture. And so in 1949, I did achieve that honor, and it's something that I really cherish today.
That's a fantastic story. But you took this journalism love that you had and that you'd already become really engaged with and made a whole career out of it. Can you tell us how you went from being a graduating senior at the University of Florida to being the founding editor and publisher of Worth International?
Communications Corporation, or DBA, Worth International Media Group. It was an interesting transition. When I did some work when I was on campus for United Press, even before it was United Press International, as a stringer or as a correspondent. And I had hoped to get a job with them, but they wanted me to live in Jacksonville. My mother was ill, and I felt that I should go back to Miami, where, by the way, I am a lifelong Floridian, and Miami-Dade County was my home, even though I have been in Broward for the last 20 years. Anyway, so I came back to Miami and went looking for a job. Of course, I had written to a number of newspapers and radio stations, and I did manage to get a job working on a newspaper and a radio station. The radio station during the day, the newspaper, which was a morning paper, we did a lot of our work after 6 p.m. Because they had, we worked almost till after midnight, because we were still producing in those days newspapers at 3 in the morning and 4 or 5 different editions. So I guess you know which newspaper I'm talking about. So, and then it really got too much. I married my first wife, which unfortunately I lost to diabetes about 21 years ago, 22 years ago now. So I decided that the money I was making wasn't enough to support a family, which I had planned. And so I started going into the public relations business and did public relations for a couple of years. And then by accident in 1953, in speaking with an ad agency, he had received a call from the New York Herald Tribune. And those of you who know newspapers know that the New York Herald Tribune, God rest its soul, was one of the great newspapers of all time. And they were looking for a representative to cover resort and travel advertising for them in covering Florida, Mexico, Bahamas, and the Caribbean. And so I said, you know, that sounds fascinating, because the money I would make would be not reliant on someone else giving me a salary and having to ask them for raises, but would be directly related to how good I could do or how I could serve. So I went up to New York and had a 4.5-day session with them and walked out with a contract from the New York Herald Tribune. Within 6 months after that, the word had gotten out that I was in business. There were other people, by the way, in the same business. The Columbus Dispatch, the Indianapolis Star News, the Minneapolis Star and Tribune, Des Moines Register and Tribune, Buffalo Courier Express, Toronto Telegram, Montreal Press, others just came running, and I ended up with 13 newspapers. And I served as a newspaper representative, independent newspaper representative, from 1953 to 1966, 67. One day, in talking and speaking with one of the hotel owners, he had asked me to do a newsletter for 7 independent hotels that had banded together to do promotion, a newsletter for travel agents. And I said, of course, you know, anything to put a few extra bucks on the table. So I started doing that newsletter. And about 5 months down the road, they said to me, you know what, Hal, we want to get some advertising in there to pay for it. Would you go to Eastern Airlines and see if they would get an ad, put an ad in and help us pay for the newsletter? Foolishly, I said yes. And I went to Eastern Airlines, met the execs, and they, oh, yes, we'd be glad to. You know, in those days, the comradeship was not like it is today. I mean, it was very close. Everybody worked together, and it was, yes, we can do it, not, oh, let us take this to the board and find out. So driving back from Eastern Airlines, I said, gee, you know, it's a shame that we can't have this type of information, which was generally educational, descriptive information, just for the city of Miami Beach. Why for just 7 hotels? And I said, whoa, wait, why not the state of Florida? So I said, you know, I think I'm going to do a magazine. I'm going to create a magazine to the travel agents, now travel advisors, covering the state of Florida, educating them on all the great facilities in the state of Florida. Because all the other publications, I had researched it, that's a good word, and found that they basically didn't do any kind of education or information about products and destinations. They reported industry news and they discussed industry problems, which was great for a trade publication and what they should do, but none of them had the editorial approach that I was going to do with this magazine. And I started Recommend, which today now is in its 53rd year or 54th year. And fighting, of course, for its life with this pandemic. And of course, we're into the digital phase. We do a lot of newsletters now. And so that's how I got into that phase of publishing. Along the way, I started doing a lot of work, which was then called the Florida Advertising Commission, then became the Florida Development Commission, and then became the Florida Department of Commerce, and then became Visit Florida. Uh-huh. And I had worked with all the governmental bodies over the years and was very active in formation and trying to form Visit Florida. I am a guess you wouldn't, initial member or a founding member of Visit Florida. And the second honor that I cherish most, it was the Florida Commission on Tourism, which was the overseer of Visit Florida. And the governor is the chair of that. And anyway, they had a committee, and I was fortunate and honored to be selected to the Florida Tourism Hall of Fame. And as you know, Mike, that ugly likeness of mine is sitting in the Capitol building.
That's the most handsome thing in the building, Hal. I've seen it.
You're just too nice.
Now, let me ask you a question. Clearly, you had a meteoric career in Florida tourism, and the state recognized you and the industry recognized you. How did you come back and reconnect with the tourism program at the University of Florida? How did that happen?
It's a very strange story. And it's funny how things happen when you don't expect them to happen. I've always believed in research, not as a panacea or cure-all to a marketing problem, but certainly as a guideline and definition and information that will help you make intelligent decisions. And so I served for 6.5 years on the International Board of Directors of the Travel and Tourism Research Association. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Yeah. And at one time we had a chapter in Florida, and I was president of the Florida chapter of TTRA. So I'd always been interested. And I was at a Visit Florida session about 1998, 99, somewhere 2000 in that area in St. Petersburg, when Dr. Pennington Gray was making a presentation on the work she had done for Visit Gainesville, or the Gainesville Tourist Development, or the Alachua County TDC. And I said, well, I don't know, another one of those things. So I said, nah, I'm going to sit in. So I went into the session, and I was dumbfounded because it was really an impressive presentation. They really got to hardcore issues and information, and I was impressed. And afterwards, I went up to Dr. Gray and I told her how that, very frankly, I usually were not impressed, with all due respect, with academic presentations, but how well this research was. And we started to chat, and she says, well, yeah, we do a lot of work, we do a lot of research, tourism research. I said, I didn't know the University of Florida had anything in tourism aboard. And she said, yes, we have we have a department. I think it was called, it was another name, but I think not them, but another name. And we have also the Center for Tourism Research and Development. I said, what? And they said, well, it's this thing where we go out and we secure research grants from destinations, companies, and so forth and so on. I said, that's very, very interesting. I said, I didn't, first of all, know you had a curriculum. Number two, I didn't know you had this research center and so forth. And I'm a Gator, and, tell me more about it. And we got into conversation, and we decided that they needed help. When I say help, I mean funding. And I felt that my background, my many years in the industry, could help the university, could help the tourism program, could help build the Center for Tourism Research and Development. And so I sat down with Lori, and we formed this advisory board. Very, very difficult in the beginning. Put some great people together on it. In fact, one of our board members now was part of the original board, Richard Goldman. And little by little, we got people. The challenge was that the program at the University of Florida was so new that we didn't have graduates of the tourism program in positions to take significant or to be significant in their role on our board, our advisory board. So we brought a lot of people in that I knew that were not Florida alumni that served. And for 11 years, it was up and down and up and down. And I got to the point where I felt we weren't making any progress. And I was about to leave the whole thing and said, look, I tried my best, but it didn't work. And then along came Mike Reid. And I don't want to embarrass you, who became the dean of the HHP, and they asked if I would speak with you, and I said, certainly, and I sat down, and I tell you, within 20 minutes, I was rejuvenated. I never met a non-tourism person, of course, you've changed since, but a non-tourism program who understood the concepts and what the business was all about, and gave me the enthusiasm, actually recharged my battery, so to speak, and said, yes, I like this guy. I think we're going to have a great opportunity to work together. I'm going to stay with it. And so I did. And along the way, had the opportunity to run into somebody at a football game that I'd known for 25 years, hadn't seen in 25 years, who I'd worked with, Sid Geffen. And we reminisced and so forth and so on. And
hang on. Now, at that point, you were the chair of the advisory board, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was the chair of the advisory board. We were still in that transition where you had just come aboard almost, if my memory serves me.
No, I think all this happened before I got here, Hal. I think you and Sid had this conversation before I was ever on campus. I would like to take credit for that. I'd like to have been the dean at the time, but I think you predated me.
That's interesting. You know, I'll have to really research the thing.
But
Mike, you were aboard when it happened because you went to meet. You went to Jacksonville and you met Sid and.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah. No. You had just come aboard.
All right, forgive me. I'm sorry I interrupted.
And that's right. And I may have met him a couple of months prior, but you were instrumental in as we tried to formulate and create the Eric Friedheim tourism industry, because I found out that Sid was the chair of the Eric Friedheim Foundation. And by the way, I knew Eric, fine journalist. Remember I mentioned earlier, he reported in industry news and discussed industry problems. His magazine did that. And while we were competitors for the dollar, Eric Friedheim and I were very close friends. We used to go lunch together. When he'd come down to Palm Beach, we'd have dinner. He had a residence here also. And then I had the opportunity to meet Edith Hall Friedheim, Eric's widow, and it has been such a wonderful, wonderful friendship. She's a very, very dear friend, and she has given us the financial basis for growth. I can't thank her enough, and not only for the Eric Friedheim Foundation support, but for her support on the board and everything she does on the board. And I'm thankful for the friendship. It's a great friendship, social friendship also. So good things happen.
Total, Hal, how long ago did you first join the advisory board? When did you first set that up? Early 2000s, 03 maybe?
No, when Alice took over, you gave me a plaque, and I'm looking for the plaque here. And,
Yeah, I've gotten us distracted because I want to talk about that very thing. You've seen this whole thing evolve. You've seen the board and its activities and its membership and its focus change. Tell me about that, about how that these changes have evolved over time. How would you contrast the current board and what it does with the original board? How is it different now? How has it progressed?
So first of all, let me use the word significantly. Thanks to Alice Norsworthy of Universal, who took over the chair, I was very fortunate to twist Alice's arm and get her on the original board. When she took over as chair, she really enlarged the scope and the understanding of what the board should be and could be. I'll always be thankful for that, especially as I think I mentioned earlier, well, no, I didn't, the fact that she created that awareness of a curriculum that was industry driven in terms of, you know, turning out graduates who could go back into the workplace ready to assume responsibility because they understood what was needed.
Yeah.
So Alice really, in her 3 years or 3.5 or 4 years of being the chair, really took it to another level. I told her that. She was kind enough to say, well, you did the foundation and everything else, but I can tell you that we were very, very fortunate to have Alice, who's a great Gator also, by the way, take it to the level of which it is now. We really have opened new horizons, and I'm very, very excited about the future. And I don't know if I'm jumping any questions you might have, but now that you have created is it a separate department for, and a separate, not a dean, what is it, chairman?
Yeah, so it is a new department. It's the Department of Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Management. And we've just recruited our first permanent chair for that department, Dr. Rachel Fu from the University of Tennessee. So she's a tourism economist, but she's also strongly grounded in the industry and is excited to be working with the faculty to follow your vision all along, which is to have this curriculum and the research in the University of Florida really focused on benefiting the tourism industry itself.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because in the short time that I've had the opportunity to work with Rachel, I can tell you, you talk about excitement. First of all, the reason I'm so enthused about the future of EFTI, the Tourism Institute, and the University of Florida's tourism program and them is not only what the foundation that Alice has built and the board that we're rebuilding now and the new people aboard, but and I call her Dr. Fu, but Rachel, in the short time that we've communicated, she is, in one word, dynamite.
Yes.
Yeah. You talk about somebody who doesn't start in first gear. She's in fifth gear when she. So well, it's really great to see what it's going to take time. We're going to stub our toes here and there, and everything else. But we got some good people coming aboard, some new people coming aboard. Transition is good. New blood is good. And the building blocks are there. The foundation is strong. You got Dean Reid, you got Dr. Fu, and you've got a great board. And we've got a foundation that I think will move us forward and bring the University of Florida's tourism program really to national prominence, which it should be. And unfortunately, no one knew about it the 18 years ago that I think it's about 18 years that I first got involved. You know, in doing that, the three things I wanted to do when I first sat down, as I said, 18 years ago, and discussed this with Dr. Gray, is I said we needed three things. We needed the board needed to do three things, and I want to stress them. And you know, with all the wonderful other side things we're doing, we need to actually make the world aware of the University of Florida and its tourism program and its research capabilities. So there's awareness. Secondly, in order to continue to grow and move forward, we need to raise funds. So we need to find programs that we can bring in dollars, bring in scholarships, bring in funding for the Tourism Institute, and so forth. And thirdly is, with all the research that is going on in the world today, and it's growing, the University of Florida's, I guess it's the Eric Friedheim Tourism Institute, should now receive research grants from destinations, countries, states, TDCs, CVBs, airlines, whatever industry needs research. They should come to the university, because one of the things that I learned is that the research program within the University of Florida uses the entire University of Florida faculty and campus to pull information to supplement any need for any specific type of research, from agriculture to land management, ecology, to science, or whatever it might be. Somewhere along the line in tourism research, there are a lot of things that you wouldn't classify as tourism that is going to be needed to enhance the tourism report. And so forth, because the University of Florida now is what, the sixth or the fifth or sixth?
Number 6, yeah.
In the nation now of state universities,
yep.
And so forth. And it's built and continued to build its faculty in all departments, in all elements, in all categories. There's this tremendous reservoir of information that's available for the tourism industry to pull if they use the tourism research program at the University of Florida.
Hal, that's the sort of visionary statement that illustrates why you've been so instrumental for all these years at growing this advisory board and supporting our faculty and our students. I want to thank you for taking time to have this conversation with me. We are so honored to have you as our founding chair for the Eric Friedheim Tourism Institute Advisory Board, and we thank you for your time today.
Well, it's been my pleasure and my honor to serve. I'm a Gator, but I can tell you, Mike, we've got a great future ahead of us, and thank you for what you're doing, because you have been instrumental on keeping this all together and moving forward. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Hal. Thank you again, and go Gators.
All right, take care.